Mark Hoskin. Mark connects with two others of our speakers in that he's got a background in the sea, like Mark. He's sailed most of the world's oceans, both as an amateur and a professional. He lectures in international maritime law, history, and international relations of China. Of course, therefore connecting with Ed as well. So he's again going to be looking at a modern topic. Lovely to have you here, Mark, for the first time presenting. Away you go.
Thank you, Mike. So this is a map published in 1st of December 1947, South China Sea. It's the island location map of the South Sea. And this is commonly known because of its line, the dash line. The numbers are used, like the 9-dash line. This was the 11 dashes. 2 of them were removed up in the Gulf of Tonkin. And it's not the first map with a line on it published by China. And that surprises people, because when you're talking about maps in the South China Sea in a dispute today, people actually don't know as much about it as perhaps, in my opinion, they should, but also in terms of what it means and what it represents. Now, this map was purely about the islands. How do you locate islands? How do you say, well, islands inside an area belong to a certain country, in that country's opinion? And the answer is you draw a line around them. It's been done for centuries. Britain has even done it. There are maps that have been published, the British Isles, with lines around them. And they show fisheries zones and also the islands themselves, including Rockfell, which isn't actually an island, it's a rock. But it was claimed as such until recently. And so this is something that always, well, not always, but has interested me since childhood, because I spent a lot of my time out in Southeast Asia as a child growing up. And this map was for one specific purpose, just to show the island locations. So why? Where did that come from? Because of course, it didn't come from nowhere. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is a map from SCAP, General MacArthur's military government of Japan. And this shows the administrative areas. Now, if you can zoom in on the lines that are drawn around the Japanese home islands or Korea, you can see they're of a certain style. And what they show and reflect is firstly, those areas, but also a territory. They're talking about inside those areas, what is the region that's covered. And this was actually used to talk, to communicate with the Chinese, amongst others, as to what they controlled, what they governed, in other words, but also something else. What areas under administrative control were they producing fishing licenses for both the Koreans and the Japanese? And so this was communication for many purposes at that time. Now, you can see there the boundaries, the administrative areas, and so on in the legend. If we go on to the next slide. Now, this is what the Chinese sent in response. And if you can increase the size up near Japan, and show up there in Japan, yeah. The lines actually start merging with each other. The solid line here around the Japanese home islands is China's interpretation of them. It doesn't show Korea at this point. And why is that? What are they talking about? They're actually talking about fisheries zones. And they are describing the fisheries zones used by Chinese that were the development of a law. And this was the Historic Rights Fishing Law of China that was promulgated in 1931. So what they were doing was saying to the Americans, Japanese fishermen, can't go inside this area. This is unique territory, and that's how it was looked at for Chinese fishermen only. Now, today we might think that's odd. How can it be territory? You can't do that. But actually, if you're Chinese, you can. Chinese history has long shown that the sea can be appropriated and exploited by individuals and even by families uniquely, even by the government, because of the production of salt, which was a monopolized product. And so you would get a family that owned an area of the sea that they might have fishing poles in. They'd string nets between them. Or they might exploit the seabed, either by collecting what they acquired from it in terms of shellfish, or they would drop posts and put pots around them and then grow oysters. Of course, for the flesh itself, but also to produce lime for the shells. So there's a variety of processes like that where it's about production and exploitation of this particular territory that's actually just the sea and seabed, and even the air above the sea. And all of those plots were registered on land deeds. And that's a law that continues in China today. So if you went to, for example, to the Shanghai land deed office, you could fill out a land deed for a plot of water out in the sea, an area of the Yangtze River or any of its tributaries or offshoots around that area within the Shanghai municipal area. And you can find that in every coastal administrative area of China today. The last time, to my knowledge, that those laws were updated was March of 2021. And so it shows you what they were thinking at that time is, firstly, long-held Chinese beliefs and domestic laws that were then transferred into a national law in 1931, of course, because of what they saw as Japanese aggression in terms of the fisheries and the exploitation of fish. That started up in the Bohai and Liaoning Peninsula area, which, of course, Japan occupied as part of the 1904-1905 war with Russia, and basically pierced what China saw at that point as a mare clausum, the Bohai, closed sea. And as a result, with the fish that they were catching up there and their migratory patterns down towards Shanghai, eventually the Japanese followed them down there. And so this was an expression of something where the Chinese were trying to combat it. And then this map is actually the Chinese communicating that to the Americans who already knew about this law and all of these laws. You can find them in American university libraries. Can we go to the next slide?
Did you hear the 2 minutes?
I did, thank you, Mike.
Right.
And so here's the South China Sea area of that map. You know, this border, this boundary goes all of the way from the Yellow River, the border with the DPRK, down to the border with Vietnam. You can see it's straight, you can see it's dashed, you can see the same type of feathering to the inside, indicating which area they're talking about. They're not talking about the external surfaces, they're talking about the internal, what's inside the line, as being the territory that they are identifying. And one of the unique things that you can see on this map is everywhere the line changes in direction, there are coordinates. That's missing from the dashed line maps that you normally see today. And one of the big questions people ask, well, why do they change? Where's the coordinates? How can we show that this is actually a defined area? Here's the defined area map that began from. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Yes. Watch this space, I think we can say here.